if you are in a situation where you have a lot of people who are very difficult to deal with, but then you change your mind that you're going to be more compassionate to them, then the outcome of everything also becomes different. You know? And the thing is to be able to make one's own decision on how we want this outcome to be. But here is that the idea that that situations of changing situations, or having the situation change in accordance to how we want it, is done in accordance to repetition. You know, if we do things over and over again, we become acquainted with it. If we decide that we're going to be more compassionate, you know, it's not just writing down on a piece of paper that today I'm going to be compassionate. It's actually doing something or a particular step in that particular direction that's going to cause us to be more compassionate. You know, and this is what is not a big broadcast, and not something that anyone else can say to you that you're doing good or you're not doing good. It's a personal. This is what meditation is about. It's the ability to become habitual with what is correct and what is right. You know, becoming acquainted with virtue is how we describe meditation. So again, nobody can say to you, you know, that you're not practicing well, your meditation is not well. No, it's very personal, very, very personal. So once again, it was a great Indian scholar, Shantideva, who stated, there's nothing that does not become easy through repetition. The more you repeat it, the more you do it, the closer you come to it becoming something that becomes natural for you to do. It's like before you met Buddhism or anything like that. The idea of seeing a bug or something like that swimming in water and drowning or whatnot, to actually take something and get it out was not a consideration. But when meeting in Buddhism and understanding what they mean by compassion, that it becomes that when you walk by, there's no way that you cannot stop yourself from trying to help. Is turning the wheels of, you know, turning the direction, the mental direction. So we've mentally thought that how something should be, and we've changed ourselves in accordance to that direction. The world is constructed based upon how we think. The world is not constructed based upon how many airplanes or how much money we have in the bank. You know, it's our own mental standards, the whatever criteria we have, that will end up changing the world, that makes the world change. World strife does not come because of the reason that one nation has a lot and the other one doesn't. You know, these might be contributing factors, but the decision, the decision to violently confront the situation is a personal decision, and that it either causes happiness or suffering to many. You know, and understanding that these particular actions might bring about suffering. When we make the decision that this is not what we want, we don't want to cause people to have suffering, and we change our attitude toward that, what happens is that it in itself causes the world to change. That's why you have situations where you have one person in their actions they have the ability to change the direction of how society is going, you know, because what happens is that we start to understand that reality is based upon choices, right? Our realities are based upon choices. The next instance of what happens to us is based upon the choices that we decide to make. So it's better to always examine what we are doing and examine less about what others are doing. You know, because the world does change based upon what we think. You know, never underestimate your capability or the influence that you might have upon any situation. This is profound in its expression and earth-shattering in its meaning. The idea that understanding something is, or what do you call it, uh, becoming acquainted with something, that through repetition, that there's nothing that we can't. Somebody wrote before, I think it was in Facebook, about the how do you improve your memory? Well, you improve your memory by doing things over and over again. The more that you become acquainted with it, the easier that it becomes. The more you spend time in doing it. Realistic time. I don't say, you know, you sit down for hours and beat yourself to death. I mean, realistic time means that things happen over time. So if you wanted to memorize something, if you have the intention and you have the capability or the thought that you're going to continue on doing things, then you can remember anything, you can do pretty much anything that you want. Being able to do something means that you become acquainted with it over time. It's not something that you just do and it happens overnight. Repetition means exactly that, doing something over and over again that becomes accustomed to doing whatever actions. Becomes accustomed to doing whatever actions. This is the process of making an action a part of us. So in memorizing something and doing whatever we want to do, this is a process of making what we want to do a part of us, right? We're actually buying into what we have prescribed as being necessary. We believe in what we're doing. You know, this is all we need. Knowledge comes through repetition. So understanding, having the knowledge of something, it has to do with doing something over and over and over and over again. You know, it's not poof. You know, I think Anila and I were talking the other day about the consequences leading up to an accident. That is not just one thing that brings it, but it's an accumulation of many different factors coming together that causes, you know, like air disasters and things like that. It's not one thing. It could be an accumulation of mistakes that bring about, you know, certain consequences. So therefore, in understanding, then what we do is we try to eliminate mistakes. How do we eliminate mistakes? We pay attention to information. We gain a greater understanding or knowledge of information. We consume it, so that when we make the decisions that are necessary for us, we're making well orchestrated or well thought out actions. So now knowledge comes through repetition. Therefore, if we attempt to spring up a very high and difficult mountain, if we attempt to sprint up a very high and difficult mountain, we can frustrate our progress prior to achieving the summit. You know, this is not gauging ourselves. You know, this is an instance of not gauging ourselves. We want it now, and regardless of what, if anything happens, I thought it out in my mind, and this is how it's got to be, and I want it now. Is not a wise thing to do. It's the same as sprinting up a great mountain, very high. It's not possible that we have the ability to achieve the summit. But if we are meticulous in what we do, and we're well planned, we understand the perils and everything that is necessary that might arise in our progress toward that, we overcome them one step at a time, right? Just like, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. The step contemplates, the person who's walking contemplates the distance and everything like that, estimates the problems that might be encountered on the way, and takes the journey step by step, rather than only considering the results. That's the bird in the hand. You work with what you have, with your own personal capability. Personal capability is very, very strong if well distributed. So a lot of thought goes into when we do things. The idea that I thought about it and it took me 5 minutes to think about it, and coming to a fast conclusion is not what we're talking about. Our conclusions of what we should do should be something that lasts over a long time, a long period of time. This is what is necessary. Learning is the process of pacing ourselves with meticulous contemplation. Whenever you get to the point where the rush becomes more important than the investigation, we should throw the brakes on and stop. What's going to get us in trouble is the rush. Have you ever, there's a channel on television, and they talk about aviation and the what do you call those things? The disasters that have gone in. And a lot of times is because disasters happen, if they're man-made disasters, then it's because of lack of comprehension of what you're doing at that particular time that leads up to a series of mistakes. One mistake goes into another mistake. Another mistake goes into another mistake. And what happens is that at the end, because you have the accumulation of mistakes, that what happens is that the disaster arises. That's why we're saying is that learning is a process of pacing ourselves. You don't rush through things. You pace yourself. And you pace yourself with what? With meticulous contemplation. You take your time, because eventually you will get there. And if you get there, you'll get there in a one whole. You won't get there in pieces. So the idea of contemplation and pacing ourselves with meticulous contemplation is essential for anything that we do. At the beginning of The Art of War and Peace, it says, Sun Tzu says, that failure comes from making mistakes. So his antidote is don't make mistakes. We can usually look back and see where our problems come from. And they come from the mistakes that we do, whether they be that we are, self-interest has overcome, the reality of what we have to do, or it might be that we're just impatient. There are many, many conditions that bring about, failure. So what we do is that we make sure that we don't fail. If we consider problems, we don't know how. If we consider problems we don't know how to resolve at this time, with the purpose of wanting to understand it, we start to know what we previously didn't know. So when we run up to a problem solving means that you stop and you consider what you know about it. Understanding the conditions that you have at hand are essential to understand prior to being able to go forth in the direction that we want to go forth. That's why I say take time and contemplate things. Do not take things at face value. You have to look and you have to see. You know, you have to see things, you have to contemplate it, you have to take time. Remember the translation I was telling you about? One paragraph, 3-4 days. You know, this is how you get yourself into training about how to attack problems, knowing that there's no necessity. The book will not be completed faster just because of the reason I decided that I wanted to go faster at this particular time. The only thing that will happen is that after doing it, it will have to be readdressed because it wasn't done properly the first time. You know, so the thing is that we have to take our time and consider the condition and situation. That means right now, what's happening is right now what we must consider. Right? It's not considering what might happen in the future. It's considering what's happening now and making decisions that will change the direction of what the problem might be. You change it to so that it's pointing in the direction we wish it to go. So that means the outcome of what's happening has been our decision, because we're the ones, we're in the boat, we're at the helm, you know, and we know. Has anybody done boating? Do we have any sailors here? I am. I love to sail. I remember sailing a boat from it was close to New London, Connecticut, to New York. It's a sailboat. And you know, I like to sail. You know, I like the water. I like to sail. But this is, you know, when I was much younger. It's been years since. But I'm sure I can still sail. But if you're what they say, come about, when you're coming about, and you say you're coming about into the wind. If the wind's very strong, and you don't allow a certain amount of the mask, you know, or you know, to be let loose, and what happens is that it can hit you. The wind can hit you so far that it could even tip the boat off. So in letting it out a bit, letting the mask out a little bit, what happens is it lessens the amount of air that's coming into the sail, and you can make a good turn into the sail, into the wind. It's the same thing. Is that when we're changing directions, we don't like the direction that we're going. We're changing the directions. We practice in a way, or we do in a way that we understand that if we do it in a drastic way or in a way that's non-contemplative, what will happen is that the disaster, the overturn will come. But if we understand and we deal with the conditions that we have right now, then we can alter the direction because of the reason we made contemplation as the prime. We understand what the possibilities are of the disaster. We understand we can turn into the wind without having the wind so strong that it might capsize. And it does get very, very windy, especially winds and waves and all this other stuff. That, you know, these are things that you have to do. But how do you do that? You do that by understanding and contemplating and understanding the possibilities or the situation, understanding the information better than anyone else. You know, that means that you have to take time and contemplate, you know, and then be able to look back at it and think about it. And if it doesn't fit, then if it doesn't quite all fit together, then what you do is you alter it more so that it makes sure that it fits within the plan and you're getting the desired outcome that you want. It's not blind rushing ahead, hoping. I've heard many politicians, especially these days, well, he's going to do it such and such a way, and let's see how it works out. And I cringe. You mean that the fate of a nation is based upon the guesswork of a few? You know, that's almost, to me, that's scarier than the notion of the possibility of going to war. Is that you're led into war or whatever because of the reason that other people have not well contemplated the outcome of the situation. You know, they've not thought it out. They're guessing. Guessing is no good. That's speculation, right? Didn't we? It's a speculation. It's assumption. You know, assumption, a speculation. You know, that's a 50-50. You're throwing yourself into the situation where it becomes a 50-50 percentage chance of what do you call it? Of achieving. Learning is a process of pacing ourselves with meticulous contemplation. If we consider problems we don't know how to resolve at this time, you know, problems come up. And at this time, see, this is where we get fooled into thinking that I don't know how to do it right now. So therefore, you know, we'll allow chance to introduce its head into the equation. But that's not how it goes. That's not what it should be. Is that if we don't resolve, it says at this time, means it's a momentary blockage. At this time, with the purpose of wanting to understand it, we start to know that we start to know what we previously didn't know, because we're looking at it, and we're looking at it from a different understanding and a different perspective. So then when we do that, what happens is that we get a different view of how to approach. Many of us have done that. You know, you don't know something, and then you get to a point where you've looked at it long enough, you say, oh, everybody's done that, had that oh moment. That's the oh moment that comes to a resolution of a problem, or the beginning of the resolution of the problem. If a disaster happens, if a disaster is something that happens over a period of time because of many different accumulated reasons, then a solution itself is something that begins at a particular time with many individual solutions. We look at it, we think about it this way and that way and whatnot. What happens is eventually we get a logical, we come to a logical conclusion. So resolution is the same. It's not like poof, and all of a sudden, you know, we're knowledgeable and we know everything. That's not how it goes. It goes in increments. The more you do it, the better you become. The better you become at doing it, the more wisdom that you achieve. So impatience, lack of determination, fear of failure, and other such thoughts are hindrances to progresses. So what do? We take impatience, we throw it out the door. We lack of determination. I'm going to do this no matter what type of a determination. I'm going to continue on doing that. This lack of that, throw it out the door. Fear of failure. It's just fear.